One final discussion to make sure that you're ready to take and pass the January 2021 PMP exam update, and that's a deeper dive into the Agile Practice Guide. So the first thing they talk about in Chapter 1 is why now? Why is PMI recognizing that Agile is an important project delivery approach when it's been around since 2001? Well, the short answer is it took a long time for Agile or iterative methods to really reach industry recognition and common application, and I'm with PMI. I think the time is now to recognize that Agile is a viable and, in a lot of instances, the preferred delivery approach as opposed to the more traditional or predictive approach. And secondly, as the world is moving forward in 2021 and forward, the concept of disruptive technologies is becoming more prevalent throughout all business environments and organizations. And that is, I'm going to say, a key facet of what Agile iterative processes are, is it's a disruptive technology to traditional development approaches and therefore very relevant for us in delivery today. But Agile is not always the right answer. And we'll talk more in Chapter 3 about when Agile is the right approach and when a more traditional predictive approach is appropriate. But at a high level, if it's very definable work, it is probably a better candidate for a traditional or predictive approach. And if it's a very uncertain piece of work, it's probably the ideal candidate for Agile or iterative approaches. For example, constructing a building, millions of buildings have been constructed around the world. We have solid engineering processes. That is probably a good candidate for a predictive or traditional approach. But new product development, where we're trying to find that breakthrough product to allow our company to beat and exceed everything in the marketplace, iterative is probably a good approach for that. The next thing we talk about in Chapter 2 is the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles. Now, I don't believe you will be tested on specifically what's contained in the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles, but I do want to at least spend a moment or two with you on the Agile Manifesto. And if you're not familiar with it, just do a quick online search for it, look for the Agile Manifesto, and you will find it. But it says, and this was developed in February of 2001. It's been around for a while, folks. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value, and there's 4 bullets, and this is where I believe we truly define exactly what an agile or an iterative method is. Individuals and interactions is the emphasis over processes and tools. So it's all about the team and the way the team interacts with the business and the way the team interacts with each other over the predictive processes and rigor and tools. Second bullet point is working software over comprehensive documentation. And the key message the Agilists give us with that one is it's not that they're against documentation. They're all for documentation that adds value. If you need user's guides, if you need help manuals, that's absolutely valuable documentation. But producing an analysis document for the sheer purpose of feeding the design document, for the sheer purpose of feeding the development document, they're not for the analysis and design documents. They're looking for a better way to do that through the iterations. Third bullet is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Engage with the business, have conversations, and ensure that you understand exactly what it is the business wants on a continual, ongoing basis. And then finally, the one that everybody is aware of, responding to change over following a plan. We're going to plan in small incremental pieces, the iterations, 2-week sprints, and we're going to plan the details for those. But we're going to be wide open for the next iteration and the next 36 iterations, and that's where we are going to be responsive to change. And then they finish off the manifesto by saying, that is, while there's value of the items on the right, the last set of bullets, they believe in them, but they're not the focus. We value the items on the left. individuals and interactions, working software, customer collaboration, and responding to change. And then they went on to define 12 clarifying principles. And again, I don't believe these are going to be explicitly called out in your exam. It's worth a quick online search to see what they are and read them, but I don't think you need to memorize them for the exam. It's on project management principles. You're not going for your ACP, Agile Certified Practitioner certification here. Next thing they talk about is there's more than one way to be agile. There is the big A agile process as defined by that Agile Manifesto we talked about. There's another iterative framework called Scrum. There's others called Lean. There's others called Kanban. And Annex C in this practice guide does a really, really good job of calling out and explaining what each and every one of these frameworks are and when and where and how they might be appropriate to your organization. Again, it's good background material, but it's not material I believe that PMI is going to explicitly test you on in this PMP exam. If this was the ACP exam, it would be a very different story, and yes, you would need to be aware of them. And again, more details in the next chapter. But how do we pick the right approach? Traditional versus iterative? The amount of uncertainty, the amount of risk is going to determine the approach. The least uncertainty, i.e. we've built many buildings before, and therefore there should be limited risk, is probably a good candidate for the traditional. But the very high uncertainty, very high risk, maybe the iterative approach will give you more flexibility and more adaptability to change. So, how to pick the right life cycle? Well, it's not just agile versus traditional. We even have hybrids of that. But the traditional, the predictive, I'm going to say follows a very traditional approach. We do all of the analysis and we produce the analysis document and we get approval. And then we do all of the design, we produce the design document and we get approval. And then we build, and hopefully we test, and we get approval, and then we deliver. But there's variations on that. And PMI defines that as the iterative. So we may do some of it using a predictive. We do all of the analysis, and we produce the analysis document. But then we go into a bit of an iterative cycle where we do a design prototype part 1, a design prototype part 2, a design prototype part 3, and then maybe we finalize with the 4th evolution of the prototype to get to a good design position. And then we move into the next cycle and we build a piece, we deliver a piece, and then we refine it. And then we build and refine and build and refine. So it's a cycle within a cycle. And we describe that as the iterative projects. Or it could be incremental. We do a bunch of predictive projects. So we do a analysis, design, build, test, deliver of everything related to intake. And then we do another cycle of analysis, design, build, test, deliver of everything related to credentials and so forth. Almost related to a release, so to speak, in an agile fashion. And then we have the true agile or incremental. And I describe that as simply an incremental, but in 2-week cycles. We pick enough work, or all of the work, or just the right amount of work is the probably best way to phrase that can be done in 2 weeks. And we do an analysis, design, build, test, and deliver cycle of 2 weeks. And then we repeat, and we repeat. So really the big difference between incremental is an incremental typically has a longer life cycle. Each one of those cycles may be 3, 4, 5 months in length, where the agile is typically very short, i.e. 2, 3, 4 weeks in cycle. And some agilists even suggest that cycle should be as short as 1 week. And then we have the hybrid approach, which is probably what drives people the most nuts as they're trying to sort out the difference between these various life cycles. Maybe we do the big upfront analysis and the document and the approval, and then we follow along with the big upfront design and the document and the approval, and then we fall into build, test, deliver in the 2-week cycles. Or what I've seen most commonly is the second half of that is we have a large project and we do predictive start to finish for some elements of that large project, and we do agile for others. And a project I delivered in that hybrid fashion, I was implementing VLTs, slot machines, for bars for our local government. And because it was a gambling-based project, it had a lot of oversight. So a lot of the project absolutely had to be done in a predictive style. I had very specific gate points and very specific sign-off points in my project. It absolutely had to follow the predictive analysis, design, build, test, and deliver. For everything related to gaming and gambling, there was a life cycle I had to follow, and I wasn't getting government approval any other way. But within that large predictive traditional project, we also had new levels of player information for behavioral analysis information that the government had never seen before, and they really excited about how they could mine that information. So within this large predictive project, we had a data mining agile project that ran in 3-week iterations. So we picked the reports we wanted to do in player analysis and ran a 3-week iteration. And then we did our review and presented the results back to the business community, and they said, that's great, now let's try this, this, and this. So large scale, cradle to grave for traditional, and built within that was these 3-week cycles for the data mining or the business intelligence component. So there's no hard answers, there's no right or wrong answer to this. So in terms of how PMI is going to question you on this, it's figuring out the right approach based on the style of the project is really where the questions in this area is going to be. And then finally, just to add more alphabet soup to the equation, even within iterative projects or agile projects, there's 2 complementary approaches. You can do it in a true iterative or sprint-based approach. I'm going to pick just enough work and the right amount of work for 2 weeks, and I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to do it again and again and again in 2-week cycles. And that's the sprint, and that's the sprints approach. A lot of organizations actually find the alternative approach to that is a flow-based approach, and often associated with the term Kanban, works very well for them. So instead of picking all of the work and only the work for 2 weeks, you simply define your flow. I need to determine the requirements, and then I need to build it, and then I need to test it, and I need to peer review it, or whatever your flows, whatever your steps are going to be. And you basically continually manage the work through the flow, and traditionally in a Kanban approach, you say, I should have no more than 3 stories in requirements, and I should have no more than 4 stories in do it, and I should have no more than 6 stories in testing. And that's where the flow comes in. As soon as you're under your requirements limit, you bring the next highest priority story into requirements. And when you're done requirements, assuming there's capacity in do, you move it into do, and that's the flow. You manage the work through the process steps, through the flow, using this concept of Kanban or Kanban boards.